Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. For today's episode, I am delighted to be joined by author Siân Hughes to discuss her new novel, No Such Thing as Monday. This novel has been compared to Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead and Douglas Stewart's Shuggie Bain, and alike to those, it has an unforgettable narrative voice. No Such Thing as Monday tells the story of Steffi, a woman who has survived against all odds. From an unbearably difficult upbringing to navigating a life of poverty and chaos, she is someone that has faced it all. And whilst this is a powerful and moving story, it is one that is threaded with humour and hope. Author of No Such Thing as Monday, Siân Hughes is a novelist and poet who grew up in Cheshire. Her first collection of poetry, The Missing, was a Poetry Society recommendation, longlisted for the Guardian First Book Award, shortlisted for the Felix Dennis and the Alderberg Prizes, and won the Seamus Heaney Award. Siân's first novel, Pearl, was longlisted for the 2023 Booker Prize and was shortlisted for the Authors Club Best First Novel Award in 2024. Her latest novel, No Such Thing as Monday, is out now and published by Indigo Press, and here to discuss it with me, welcome Siân to A Pair of Bookends.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here.
I am so excited to chat to you, and I feel like I've just been so immersed in this novel the last couple of days, and I was weeping in bed last night.
Oh, do you know, that always makes me so happy. Every writer lives to make their readers cry. I'm so pleased.
What I will say for the podcast is that anyone that is a sister, this might break you. But thank you for writing it. It is such a beautiful story. But before we dive into your book, I do want to ask what you're currently reading.
Oh, well, I just finished reading. It's quite an old book, actually, but I got it at a book swap. It's a fantastic little bookshop in Chester called Books on the Walls, and there's a women's book swap where you go and you just say what you've loved and you swap it. And the woman next to me had just finished reading Willa Cather's My Antonina. My Antonia. Anyway, I just loved everything she said about it, and I read it in one day. I was absolutely gripped by the narrative voice, the pace of it. I loved the fact that it didn't have like an obvious ending. It just sort of rolled on. It was like a sort of soap opera that could have just picked up whenever you wanted. I absolutely loved it. Yeah, so that's the last thing that I've read. Yeah,
Oh, that
that
sounds
was really
amazing.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
Antonia. Yeah.
I love the sound of the book swap as well. I
Oh,
need to
it's
get myself over to
fantastic.
one of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, and like how great for a bookshop who's trying to sell books to have a
Yeah,
thing where people just go and swap them for free and socialize. I
it's
mean,
amazing.
what a visionary bookshop. Yeah.
Honestly, I need to get myself over there.
Oh yeah, do they do great coffee as well?
Oh, okay. Books and coffee. I'm there.
That's
I'm
it.
there. I want to start, Siân, by asking you about a thing that I often talk to authors about, which is second novel syndrome.
Oh,
And I know it differs from author to author, but I wondered, especially as your first novel was longlisted for the Booker Prize, which congratulations, by the way.
thank you.
Did that add to the pressure of writing your second novel?
Yeah, I was absolutely terrified, to be honest, because a lot of people concentrated when they were talking about the first novel on how long it had taken me, and it had taken me all my life, and that I'd written it lots of times at
Yeah.
various intervals, and each time I wrote it, it was different. It was never quite right. So I was really frightened that if I put another one out, people would go, "Oh, well, she only had one good book in her, and what if, like, oh, she's just rushed this one through and everything." So I suppose I didn't find the writing of it difficult.
Mhm.
I found like Steffi irresistible to write. I looked forward to opening my laptop and saying, "Come on, Steffi, what are you going to say to me today?" And I never knew what she'd say. And like once she started talking to me, I couldn't shut her up. She always had something new to tell me. So I really, really enjoyed the process of writing the book. But I was frightened that people would not be sympathetic to her. I mean, she's an overweight 50-something woman who swears a lot and steals things and is impulsive
Mhm.
and prickly. She doesn't like anyone to get too close. And I really love her. But when I was writing it, I just did have that worry, like, am I the only person who's going to love her?
I can confirm you are not the only person to love her because I love her so much, and I think it's so special because I do think she's a character that we don't often see represented in fiction.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that you've written her. But with her having such a striking voice, how did that voice first come to you?
Well, no, yeah, okay, this is a bit of a writer's secret. So I really love going to poetry workshops and writing workshops. And I used to go to writing workshops in Huddersfield run by the Poetry Business. And I was there, and Cliff Yates, who's a poet who's absolutely brilliant at running workshops, he ran this workshop, and it's like a game you play, and you all pretend you're on an ocean liner, and you pick a job on the ocean liner, and then you just have to like instantly like write a monologue in that voice. And I picked somebody who worked in the laundry, and then halfway through writing, he said, "Oh, did I forget to tell you?" He always throws in something extra halfway through. They've got a secret nobody knows. So I decided my laundry person's secret was that she'd learned how to do laundry in prison. And then I did play that game quite a few other times in other places after that, but I kept on coming back to this person in the laundry, and she sort of started becoming a bit of an inner soap opera, if you like, in my head, that I could tune into her whenever I liked. And she kept on talking to me. And when a character just stays with me for a really long time, I always wonder, like, are you going to tell me a whole book? I never know. Like sometimes
Please
they
stay with me.
sometimes they go, yeah, are you going to stay with me long enough? Are you going to tell me everything? Anyway, she did. So that's where she came from.
Well, thank God she stayed with you because we now have this incredible book. I want to start, I guess, with the first line of the story, which I felt is quite a shocking one. So I'm just going to read the first line to give listeners a taste of you're thrown in the deep end. I walked into the back room at Dad's house about midday with his dinner on a plate covered in cling film in one hand and a bowl of crumbling custard in the other, and he was dead in his chair. Now, I remember reading that and being late in bed next to my boyfriend and going, okay, we're there already. And I showed it to him, and he kept reading, and I was like, why are you still reading? And he was like, oh, he's dead. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah. But was that the first thing that you started with? And could you tell us what this death sort of represents for Steffi? I don't know if that's spoiler territory, but
Think it
it's
is
obviously
spoiler
the opening.
territory. When I try and describe the plot to people and they haven't read it at
Yeah.
all, and I say, well, there's this woman and she's been carer for her dad, and he's really dominated her whole life. He's isolated her,
Mm.
and he's cut her off from the support networks that would have helped her. You know, he's been like a force, you know, that's controlled the family and
Yeah.
controlled her all her life. And he dies. And then she has to work out who she is when she's no longer under his thumb, when she's no longer defined by him. She's no longer just Stan's daughter. She's just herself. Like, who is
Yes.
she going to be? And people say to me then, oh, spoiler alert, Charlotte. Like, don't tell us he dies. And I say, honestly, I'm not giving you anything away because
No.
it's in the first sentence. He's dead in the first sentence. So, like, it's not a spoiler alert except for the first sentence. So, you know, I'm not really spoiling the plot. But I mean, what I was interested in was what would happen to her mind, her memories,
Hmm.
her relationship with the wider world, and in particular with her sister,
Yeah.
when he was gone. I wanted to see what happened when the world cracked open for her because he was no longer there to define her. And so I didn't see any point in wasting any time about that, really. For me, he always died in the first at least couple of sentences. Yeah.
It's a powerful opening, and it excites me when there's a shocking opening because I'm like, where is this author going to take me next? And I do really want to ask about her relationship with her dad because it is an interesting dynamic, and he is a truly terrible man, but through her eyes, especially as a child, I don't think she necessarily understands him to be that way. And I'd love to know what it was like exploring that dynamic through the lens of a child, because you do go back and forth between her as an
Yeah.
adult and her as a child.
Yeah, I think you know, I could have told her story like starting from when she was a child,
Yeah,
but I really didn't want to because I think that what I was interested in was like the long-term effects
yeah,
of what he's done to her. I wanted to, I wanted us to meet her as the person she's become at the end of all of that. And now he's gone. She's finally able to reflect on it in a different way and to try and understand it differently. So as a child, yes, she does really love him, and she continues to love him. She tends him till the day he dies.
Yeah.
They do have a close bond. But the horrible thing about that is really that he's petted one child and tortured the other in order to use her as a kind of hostage. Where she's been a pawn in his game, that he knows that he will never get, that the mother will never be able to take Steffi. The mother can never leave him because he's got a hold on Steffi. So she's like a hostage that keeps her mother in the house, providing for him and doing everything for him. And the way that he's tormented them by dividing them, he tries to divide them. And the way I try to describe it through the way he trains his animals. So he's training an animal for a fight. If you want to train an animal for a fight, you feed one and you don't feed the other, and that makes them angry. So like you have them next to each other and you set them against each other. So when he's talking about training his cockerels for fighting or training his dogs, he says you have to sow the seeds of hatred in their hearts. That's really what he's trying to do with his children. He treats his children the same way he treats his fighting dogs. And he also talks about, these dogs that you use to train other dogs, that they're just there to be destroyed by the other dogs. And I think the most important bit about dog fighting in it is the word gameness. I found this word that is for describing the quality that a fighting dog has, that when it's completely at the end of its strength, it goes on fighting. So it's like a word for doggedness or resilience or whatever, but it's called gameness. And then when I finished the whole book, like about a year after I finished it, really, you start to then understand a bit more about what you were doing, because obviously when you're in the midst of it, you don't really know. Well, I don't anyway. And I then look back and go, oh, that's what I was doing. Right, okay. I realized that gameness is like Steffi's quality.
Yeah, 100%.
That, when she's at the end of a fight, like she's exhausted, everything has been used up, she has the ability to go on fighting.
Yeah.
And then I thought, actually, this gameness that she's got, which defines her really in the end, is probably from her mother. Which like who appears to be, that just a doormat, really, just completely oppressed. But in fact, she isn't. She's the hard work behind everything. She's the powerhouse. And so her mother has taught her gameness, has taught her this resilience, I think. And so then I thought, oh, that's why I needed to make her so old. I didn't want to talk about that kind of abuse in childhood just from the child's perspective. I wanted there to be somebody who had been shaped by it, but was still like fighting with it, if you like. And so I had to give her lots of fight.
She definitely has a lot of fight, but it is so desperately sad, because I think memory is such an interesting thing in this book, because there's a moment that really stayed with me where you write about him coming back from work late and how she would run down the stairs and he would sit her on the kitchen side and they would enjoy like toast and dripping together. And when you look at just that moment as an isolated moment, it seems like a really lovely father and daughter bonding moment, but actually how, as you said, he's using her as a pawn. Like, it's so unbelievably gross what he's doing, and it really shapes this household. And I think her memory is such an interesting thing, because her memory of that period in her life it seems to be fractured, but especially so where her sister's concerned. Could you tell us a bit about your kind of exploration of memory and a little bit about her sister?
Yeah, so like the core of the story is something I've been trying to write about for a long time, is to take somebody who's wiped all of their memories of their sibling. So every time they turn their mind to it, they're just not there in any situation, and yet logically they know they were there. So they know that there's something that's wiped it, but they can't work out what that something is. And so I did try to write stories about this, and I had this one story about a brother who's trying to remember his brother, but all he can remember is his brother's dog. So every time he tries to write about his brother, tries to look at his memory of his brother, all he sees is the dog. But of course, this story is a total failure. It never went anywhere, because like basically it's just about a dog. Like, it doesn't tell you anything. So that was sort of the ultimate challenge for me, was to try and write about this, because the important thing that I really, really need to say about Steffi and Caroline and how they become who they are, and how this missing chunk of all her upbringing is missing from Steffi's mind. How has that happened? It's very, very difficult from a technical point of view, because all the things we need to know, our narrator can't tell us.
Yeah.
She's worked out they were there, but she's got no, like, she can't tell you what it looked like or sounded like or smelt like or tasted like, all the things that a writer needs to tell you what it was. She hasn't got.
Yeah.
And I was getting really, really stuck with this, because Steffi could tell me all kinds of things, but she couldn't tell me the one thing I really, really wanted to know. And so I said to my editor at Indigo, Susie Nicklin, we were walking in London, we were walking across the bridge, actually, and she asked how I was getting on with the next book. And I said, well, actually, I'm really, really struggling, because I'm trying to write about something where the narrator can't tell you the most important thing that you need to know. I just don't know how to do that, because I need the reader to understand it. But the person who's in charge of the story is neurologically incapable, shut down from telling you the important details. I said, so it's just really, really difficult. And she just turned to me and she said, oh, yes, but what if you could pull it off? And I was like, oh no, there's a little bit like Steffi in me, which is like, somebody has dared me to do it. And I was like, yes, right then. And I thought, oh no, that's it. Like, she's dared me now. I've got to do it. And then I also realized in that moment that I was like Steffi, because she'd said, go on, I dare you, and I was like, yeah, all right then.
I'll do it.
I thought, oh, right, okay, maybe Steffi is me a bit, right. I'll go for it.
And do what you did.
Yeah.
You pulled it off. You pulled it off.
Yeah.
I want to ask about the other people in her life when she's growing up.
Sorry.
So we have their Nanny Marie, and is it Auntie Kathleen that lives next door? Is it Kathleen?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
not really an auntie, but there's like everybody on the road is an auntie. Yeah, Auntie
Calls her an
Catherine next.
auntie. But
Yeah.
it's funny, isn't it, looking at people through the lens of a child, because she thinks that they really don't like her. And
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting, because she sort of stays with that mindset she has as a child of people's perception of her. It stays with her as she grows. Why do you think do you think these people behave a certain type of way towards her, or do you think it's just that she thinks they see her that way?
Well, it's a bit of both, because obviously she is her father's creature, and they are always
Yeah.
wary of her, because they know anything that she hears that he would find out about it. So they do treat her with a certain caution that they don't treat
Yeah.
the other members of the family. But in Steffi's mind, the world is divided. The world is always at war. She thinks that, if somebody loves one person, they've got to hate another, because she's grown up in a divided household where the father has arranged them into camps, and he's arranged them as warring factions, and this is how he controls them.
Yeah.
And so, her child's mind has been formed to think that people are either your enemy or they're not. So it's affected her ability to make relationships of all kinds.
Yeah.
And it's only after he dies that she begins to question whether the fact that somebody showed love for one person would necessarily mean that they hated another, or whether that sort of dividing line of her mind of people being either for you or against you, whether that's really true. But he has to die before she can try and unpick that.
Yeah. And she did think that about her mum as well, didn't she? She thought that her mum couldn't possibly love her because she loved her sister.
So where she got that idea that if you love one, you have to hate the other, and then she says, like, even the fairy stories confirmed it, Snow White, Rose Red, there's one sister that's good, there's one that's bad. Everything in her life seems to suggest to her that you have to be in one camp or the other, and that there is no sort of safe love that goes all the way around.
Yeah, and
every love contains a hate.
It's very sad.
It is.
I
It's
mean,
a horrible thing he's done. Yeah.
It's something that stays with her throughout her life, because later in the novel, her friend from the cafe, Debbie, asks her why she hasn't asked her for help, and she says, well, like, I'm your friend, and she's so shocked that she's like, oh, well, yeah, she is my friend, but she hadn't ever perceived her that way, and she's really surprised by Debbie telling her that she's her friend, and it really broke my heart, and it really made me see that her kind of inability to form those friendships and relationships is probably shaped by the house that she grew up in, and how do you make yourself grow out of that?
Yeah, and it's she has to then sort of work out why this person is her friend now, but she still lives in fear. She thinks if Debbie finds out who she is, finds out her family's reputation, finds out things that people said about her, she's sure that she'll go off her. she'll throw out. But I could not see any way for her story to resolve happily. And
Hmm.
I do really feel it does resolve happily. I really, really wanted her to have a happy ending without her having some support network. And she can't have a support network without a friend. And so this thing of making her have a friend was like quite a revolution to me when I was writing it as well. Where, first of all, I had this person in the cafe and she went there. And then it only sort of occurred to me later, oh my goodness, she's her friend. Like
Yeah.
she's got a friend. And then I was so relieved because I was like, oh, thank goodness for that. Now I've got a method by which to make things turn good. Because by herself, she just couldn't do it. There's
Yeah.
no way she could get out of that hole on her own.
I think as well, we don't necessarily understand Debbie to be a friend because we only ever, so when we see Steffi around other people, she's often trying to make herself useful, and she's,
Yeah.
she'll be washing up for somebody, or and when she's with Debbie in the cafe, she's sorting out dirty tables, or she's
Mm.
really trying to make herself useful in that environment. So I think even we don't see, oh, actually, this is a friend.
Yeah,
She is
yeah.
somebody that actually wants the best for her. And my God, is it a relief when when you realise she has somebody in her corner, because she really deserves to have that. And I mean, from the start she did, but I think it's such an oppressive environment that she grows up in, that that kind of care that she's maybe shown, I don't know, there's too much. There's too much to it. I don't know how to explain it very well. It feels like there's a cost to that care. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
At
yeah,
the start, at the start.
yeah, definitely. And, she has to feel that she can accept a friendship, she can
Yeah.
accept affection, and obviously there's lots and lots of things in her mind that make her think that she isn't worthy of that.
Yes.
And if somebody finds out what she's really like, that they'll run for the hills.
Hmm.
And yeah, her way of making connections with people is trying to do something practical. When she goes to visit Kathleen, and Kathleen is quite mean to her, really, and she still feels she's stuck in that relationship where she's a child in Kathleen's house and she's going to tell her off and shoo her out the door. And
Yeah.
so she does the washing up.
Yeah.
And I think that you see, like somebody like Steffi, she's not going to say something kind-hearted to you. She's much more likely to swear. But like when you turn around, she'll be doing something practical. Like she can express her affection in practical ways. Which is why I changed her job at the end. It was a bit of a spoiler alert, so I'm not gonna go into that. But like she changes to a job where I really think she'll be happy
Yeah.
because she's able to express her warmth towards
Yeah.
people in acts of service, which is what she's been doing to her dad for years. He's been coming around and putting his socks on and writing up his dentist appointments and his making his lunch and being late back to work every single day because she takes him his lunch and she's not really allowed that many minutes for lunch. And, she might have been quite gruff. I mean, even when she's sitting there with him dead and she's talking to him, she's not she's not exactly warm and overflowing with obvious affection. But in acts of service, she expresses her love all the time.
She really does. I want to talk to you about your exploration of class and poverty, because I think for most people from either working class or lower class backgrounds, you're never really sort of set up for success, and it's incredibly hard to kind of work your way out of that background, and anything can kind of set you back. I've grown up with a clear awareness that I'm never too kind of far away from being incredibly skint. You don't have things to fall back on. And I wondered what was important to you in terms of how you portrayed that experience.
What was important to me was to be respectful of it. That was where it comes from. That sense that, something outside your control, like particularly in terms of her housing, that she lives in a world where she can't count on anything, where anything can be pulled out from under her feet, and where the slightest change or adjustment is disastrous. So when her father dies and she loses the attendance allowance, there's no money for food. That was what they both what they both had left over for food. Then she has to pay for a funeral. I sort of worked out on what she could possibly be earning, that it would take at least 12 months of quite chunky installments to pay for that funeral. During that 12 months, she can't put a deposit down on anywhere to live because she has to pay the funeral. So I sort of wanted in that year after he dies that there are these little support mechanisms in place there, just sort of take them away one by one, but to show how easily that's done.
Yeah.
You don't have a contract that means you've got any rights if somebody says you don't come in tomorrow.
Yeah.
You don't have a rent book where you live. You don't have any ownership or any say in it. That everything is built on very shaky foundations.
Yes.
And the only thing that can ever rescue you is just more and more work. It's just like more and more grinding work is the only way through it. And then obviously I did want to sort of her to come through that, but I sort of timed it in my mind that like by the time she's paid off the funeral, that there might be some space within what she can do that she's able to help herself. But when, you know, somebody like Steffi's not going to have any other means of paying for that funeral. You know, there isn't any other way to do it. Yeah, so I just wanted to be respectful of it, really. I didn't want to glamorize it or, you know, or be pitying.
Yeah.
You know, I do really admire Steffi's resilience. I admire the fact that she works her way out of it without any help from anybody. And I do try and point out that there are support networks. Like she goes to the AA meetings, there's a rehab centre. That is a really, really good resource. And I have worked in places like that. They're generally very underfunded, invisible. Nobody like finds them a cute charity to help or whatever. There's no puppies, kittens, or babies involved. And I wanted to point out that there are these little corners. There's like help from friends. Like her sister goes to a refuge. That there's AA meetings. There are little groups of people who like do offer some kind of help when you're really, really down on your luck. So at the same time as trying to be respectful of the process and admiring of how Steffi survives it, you know, puts herself back on her feet, also wanted to, you know, acknowledge that there are bits of support network in there if you can access them.
Yeah, I think her resilience is admirable, and it's really funny because I saw a part of myself in Steffi in that she has so much pride and she's so stubborn that she won't often ask for help. She'll often say, "Oh, I'm fine," when she's not. And it's really funny because I saw that part of myself, but I felt so frustrated with her. I was like, how dare you, Hannah, be frustrated with her when you do the exact same thing?
But I think that that is part of that, isn't it? I mean, the only bits of that experience that I've seen and experienced close up is like the worse it gets, the more likely you are to say, you know, get out of my face, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Because there's that sort of oppressive shame about the fact that you've messed it all up again. It's all gone horribly wrong, and what are you going to do? And I don't know what it is about when you get into that headspace when that happens, but like that's the point where you tell everyone to sod off, isn't it? I don't know why, but I did.
No, I'm the same. But that shame, do you think that shame has come from the household she grew up in?
Partly. I mean, I think it's you know, it's the way that she's interpreted that you know, she does feel that she's one of the bad guys. And if you're one of the bad guys, it's very, very hard to ask for help, isn't it?
Definitely. I want to talk about her mum and her relationship with her mum. And
Yeah.
when I think of her mum, I feel like her, and I don't know if this is an unfair observation, but I feel like her mum is almost like an apparition in that, I mean, she's actually keeping everything in the household going, but her work isn't valued and her voice isn't heard. So that's why I perceived her that way, is that she was like a kind of ghostly presence, but she kept everything moving. And there's a moment that I mentioned before about how Steffi talks about feeling that her mum couldn't love her because she loves her sister at the same time, and that it could only be one without the other. I'd love to know what it was like creating that character, and why you think she doesn't realise the sort of power that she holds.
Well, it was really difficult to sort of see her mother clearly because I was only sort of listening to Steffi's voice, so I was only tuning into her. And I sometimes address a question to Steffi in my head and go like, well, you know, look at her. Tell me what she looks like. Tell me what she sounds like. Tell me where she is. And she would just sort of disappear from sight. I mean, Caroline's completely invisible.
Yeah.
But I think that like her mother is like on the edge of her vision, but she finds it very, very hard even to see her.
Yeah.
So I suspect that the level of abuse that's aimed at her sister that makes her totally invisible, that there is a version of that on her mother as well. So it's very hard to catch a glimpse of her.
Yeah.
It's very hard for Steffi to hang on to a clear memory of her or describe her. So it's sort of by clues that she works out how resilient this woman was. And it's only like she works out in her absence what it was she was doing that was keeping them all and keeping everything going, but it's only in retrospect, and not by being able to look clearly at her in her mind and go, right, okay, I remember you doing this, but more by trying to piece together other evidence.
It was really hard to read, you know, about how her mother is kind of, she is keeping that household moving, and they live on shaky foundations, as you described it before, but she has a way of keeping keeping everything moving, and she's never kind of thanked for that work that she's put in. And I was really fascinated by your exploration of gender roles, and I don't know if this was even a conscious thing that you were doing, and I wondered if it was specific to their kind of class backgrounds or whether it was the period of time that they were growing up in. But at the beginning, when she finds her father dead, she goes into this pub, which I think is like maybe a working men's
Oh,
club. And it, you know, they all stare at her because it's so uncommon to see a woman in there unless she's behind the bar. And then there's another point in the novel which really made me laugh, where she walks into a betting shop and the men are just all completely silent. And she's like, Steffi kind of observes that if this was full of women, we'd all be chatting, we'd know what each other were betting on, we'd know what each other were having for the tea. Like,
exactly. You didn't get it anywhere else. Yeah, I used to have to go into the betting shop every week. When I was a student, the house that I was renting was owned by the bookie, and so you had to go in and pay your rent.
right.
Take your little green rent book in and slide it under the grill in the betting shop. And so I was used to going in there. And then I worked in a cafe that was really very like Debbie's cafe, like in the bus station. And the owner, I don't know if it's the owner, but the boss in the cafe, he was always trying to get us from the kitchen to go and put his bets on. And I was the only one who would do it. All the other girls were like, I'm a girl, I can't go in a betting shop. Like, what if my dad finds out? Like, my dad knows I've been in a betting shop. Like, I'll be the talk of the street. Like, I can't go in there. I've seen someone sees me coming out, you know. It was like a place that like none of the other girls would
Yeah.
go. But because I went in to pay my rent every week, I was like, it's all right, I'll go. And they thought this was really shocking behaviour. You know, a girl visibly going into a betting shop, you know, that wasn't what you did. And that thing about not being allowed in the snooker room, that is absolutely true. I've worked in that club. I've worked behind the bar, and like you were not allowed to go into the snooker room to get the glasses because the snooker room was strictly men only. Yeah.
Just
And
so
I don't know if it's like that now, but when my brother's girlfriend, like they had a cat that went missing, and somebody said they found the cat dead, and so she went to pick up this cat. It turned out it wasn't theirs, but anyway, she thought it was, and she wrapped it up, and she needed to go and find my brother, and she knew he was playing snooker, and so she walked into the snooker room with this dead cat wrapped up in a blanket.
oh my God.
My brother was like, the thing was, everybody in the snooker room was mostly shocked that a woman had walked in. Like, they didn't really care about a dead cat.
Oh my God.
The thing that was really shocking was a woman walked into the snooker room. Never mind if she was carrying a dead cat, that was by the by.
That's great. I mean, that needs to be in a book, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think I'll probably have to ask their permission about that. It's a bit like a moment for them.
It's very specific.
Yeah, it's very specific, and it still really upsets them. So.
I can imagine. I mean, you just mentioned there about you used to work in a cafe as well, and it made me laugh because I did think when I was reading this book that you have to have worked in hospitality at some point, because you describe when she's working in a restaurant, she describes walking in and how hideous the smell is and how it gets into your nostrils and your mouth. And I was like, only somebody that has worked in hospitality can understand that smell.
That dividing line between the kitchen and the outside world and everything. Yeah, I did quite recently work in hospitality. I mean, I've worked in it off and on, you know, since the 1980s. And what shocks me about it is that nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. The pay's no better. The conditions are no better. In fact, I think the shift patterns are worse. When I was writing Pearl, I worked split shifts in a restaurant, and that split shift thing that only the women with children are doing to fit around after school care. It's such a sexist thing. It is such a sexist thing. Like, it doesn't matter how many laws there are in place that say that, you know, protect women's working rights alongside men. As long as there's a thing called split shifts, like, we're being screwed over.
Yeah.
You know, so many ways in which the women are expected to fit their working lives around their children, and all of them rob us of money every single time.
Yeah, that observation that Steffi makes in the restaurant, where she's talking about how these women are so grateful that they found a job that fits around their children, but actually because they've had a split shift, they're not entitled to free food, they're not entitled to a break. They are essentially doing an entire day where they've lost out on money at work, they're not being paid for the labor they're putting in at home. So it's just it's
double transport costs to get back.
Yes.
And have pay docs because they can never get back quite on time.
Yeah.
And they've still got to pay their babysitter at home. And yeah, they've just been robbed, basically.
Yeah. It's incredibly unfair.
Yeah. And the idea, you know, she goes into the library to find out about the 12-hour day, because obviously everyone's working basically a 12-hour shift.
Yeah.
Some of them have got a split, which means that they go off and work even harder for 3 hours in the middle of it. But they basically, everyone's doing 12 hours at a time. But historically, the 12-hour day was supposed to have been abolished sometime in the 19th century. But the hospitality industry runs on standard 12-hour shifts.
Yeah.
And that's before you have your breaks taken off you and you
Yeah.
have to stay an extra hour because nobody's cleared up yet, or you've been busy, or you've got to lay up for breakfast. So the 12-hour day is alive and well in our society.
It's grim. I remember when I was working at a certain restaurant and it was, long shifts and your finish time was never your finish time. Whatever you were on the rota for or till, you were never guaranteed to leave at that time. And it used to drive me insane at how unfair that was, that you were just expected, well, the restaurant's busy, Hannah. So what do you mean you want to leave? I'm like, because that's when I was rotated on till. I need to go home at 9 p.m.
Yeah, well, that's when you're paid. You're only paid till then. Yeah. And if this says like, oh, in a 12-hour shift, you're going to get like two 20-minute breaks, you are not.
No.
You are not going to get 20-minute breaks. You're lucky if somebody hands you some cold food and gives you 10 minutes off the floor for longer than 10 minutes, because no one's going to go in your section and be utterly go back. Everyone's going to be because you haven't been there for 10 minutes, whatever. So there's no way you're going to get those breaks.
No, definitely not. No, it's so frustrating. I think I had trauma reliving the restaurant experience through Steffi. I have two last questions before I ask for your recommendation. The question that I want to ask is about the humor, because throughout Steffi's life, she survives so much, she overcomes so much, but her humor never wavers. And obviously, I can put it down to Steffi, but that is your humour coming through. You're the one writing this. So where do you think that humour comes from?
I don't know, really. I mean, Steffi always made me laugh. That's one of the reasons that I loved writing her so much. Right when she first appeared to me when she was working on an ocean liner for some reason, how did you get on there, Steffi? I don't know. That I knew that she would make me laugh, because whatever grim situation she would be in, that she would have such a sardonic way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And her little observations of things. I mean, she says at one point that when she's talking about drug dealing, actually, that like she's very, very good on the detail, but she can't see the big picture. But there's something about the way that she looks at the detail, which is very funny.
Yeah.
And I think when somebody's missing the big picture and they're joking about the detail, it's actually quite funny in itself, because you're going, look at the big picture.
Yes.
But they're not. They're just like, they've noticed that one little tiny thing that makes them laugh, and they haven't noticed what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that is like basically why she's so funny.
She's so funny, and just the way she observes the world just cracks me up. She went through the most horrendous experiences, and to still keep that humor, I think, is such, I don't know, it's such an achievement. And I don't want to belittle that in any way, because I just so admired the way she moved through the world when it felt like the whole world was against her. I just really, really love this character. I think she's one of my favorite characters that I've ever read. I just loved her so much, and I didn't want to leave her. I think lastly, I want to ask about the title, No Such Thing as Monday.
Right, okay.
Could you tell us the meaning behind the title?
Well, it's a phrase taken from the book. So it didn't start off with this title. It didn't really have a title for ages. It was just called Steffi. And then the marketing department said, you've got to come up with a title, and we want a phrase. We don't want like a word or a single thing. We want a phrase. And so I was going through the book trying to find like little favorite phrases, and this was one of them. It was one of my favorites. So No Such Thing as Monday is Steffi's trying to explain what it's like to live in a house where what you see and what you hear, you can't see and hear it. That your experiences as they happen are constantly wiped. And I think that a lot of people, when they talk about like trauma wiping memory, they think it's one thing. They think it's like it happens once and you wipe it. But what we're talking about is a constant habit of mind, something that destroys all your confidence in your sensory data, that you never know what's what because you're constantly wiping the tape as it happens. So there's no such thing as Monday. She tries to explain it. She says, imagine if somebody says that Tuesday comes straight after Sunday. There's no such thing as Monday. Monday is not a thing in your house. And so that's what the title is about. And so actually I'm quite glad that they picked that one, because it's the one where we're trying to explain what it's like to have holes or gaps. Have a gap in your mind that's as significant as if you've just removed a day.
Yeah.
But everybody else says there's a Monday and you see it on the calendars, but you think, oh, why did they put that there? It's stupid. It doesn't exist.
I mean, I think that title captures her experience so perfectly, and I was so drawn to that section where she's talking about what it's like to grow up in a household where that is the situation where, you know, if you're told that Monday doesn't exist, you just accept it as fact. And, you know, that obviously is something that has kind of stayed with her, and, you know, it impacts her memory and it impacts everything in her life. I just think this is such an incredible book, Sean, and I'm so grateful that you wrote it. But for the listeners, you need to grab yourselves a copy of No Such Thing as Monday. I'm going to pop a link in the show notes to order yourselves a copy or head to your favourite bookshop. Come and talk to me about it, because I really, really want to talk to more people about Steffi. I loved her so much. She's such an incredible character, and I'm just completely in awe of you, Sean. I love this book. But before I let you go, I do like to end by asking for a recommendation. This can be books, TV, film, anything goes for this one. What would you like to recommend?
Well, I'm going to recommend a favourite book of mine, which also came out with Indigo Press, which is a translation from German. It's called Boy with a Black Rooster, and it's by somebody called Stephanie Schultz, I think. And a Boy with a Black Rooster, you'll find it. So it's a sort of a weird landscape book. It could be post-apocalyptic, it could be medieval. You can't tell. It's just this sort of very dangerous, destroyed landscape with this wonderful young hero who has, despite everything that happens, has such a good heart. And he sets out on a quest, of course, because it's a bit of a sort of fairy tale for grown-ups, to solve like a major crime, like a serial crime that's been going on in his world. And there doesn't seem to be any infrastructure as such. There's no sort of mechanism of sharing news or traveling or whatever, but he sets off to go and find out who's committing this serial murders, basically. And yeah, he meets one of the most fabulously grotesque villains I've ever read.
Oh my God, this sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and it's a bit bonkers. And people say, well, what kind of a book is it? You know, and I don't really know. But that's a really good thing with a book, isn't it? Where somebody says, oh, is it like a detective thing? No. You know, is it historical? No, we can't tell if it's historical or not. It's just its own thing. It's a bit of a one-off. It's pretty bananas, but I really like it. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes that's some of the best books you'll read is when you can't quite place.
Yeah, it's like you don't know what genre to put it in.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I love that. I will have to add that to my ever-growing TBR pile.
Yeah.
But lastly, I want to say thank you so much, Sean, for joining me today. I've absolutely loved this conversation, and I think I've made it very clear how much I love this book. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your time. Just delighted to meet you, and thank you for taking Steffi to heart. I'm so relieved. Honestly, I've been so worried about sending this person out into the world.
No, I love her so much. I didn't want to leave her. She's amazing, and I'm really grateful that you've created this character. So thank you. Is there anywhere that the listeners can find you online? No, you're free from the online world. I respect that.
I can't do it at all. It just upsets me. And also, like the temptation, if you have a book coming out, to like go and see like what people are saying. It's like I just never ever do it. So I'm sure that if there's something I really should read, that my publisher will tell me. But other than that, I don't. And I protect myself.
As is your right to protect yourself. But listeners, you can find Siân through her books. So I will be linking those in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate, review and subscribe. And if you want to give us a follow, you can find us at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on TikTok. That is all we've got time for. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And thank you once again, Siân. Goodbye.